Story 1, Jade, Columbus, Ohio. I'm 24 now. When this happened, I was 20, a sophomore at Ohio State, and I was the kind of person who overplanned everything. I had a color-coded packing list. I had a folder on my phone with confirmation numbers and check-in times, and the address of the nearest urgent care to wherever we were staying. My friends thought it was both annoying and secretly reassuring, which is an accurate summary of how I operated. All of that planning, all of that preparation, all of that color-coded certainty, and none of it accounted for what happened at a rental house in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, over 5 days in March of that year. Because you can plan for a lot of things. You cannot plan for what you don't know to look for. There were 4 of us. Me, my roommate Tess, and 2 girls from our floor named Danny and Priya. We'd booked a beach house through a rental platform about 2 months in advance, a 3-bedroom house a block from the beach with a back deck, and a small private pool that none of us were going to use because it was March and 68 degrees, but we liked the idea of it. The listing had good reviews. The check-in process was smooth. The house was clean when we arrived, stocked with beach towels and extra toilet paper the way good rental houses are, with a welcome note from the management company on the kitchen counter and a lockbox code that worked on the first try. We settled in. First night was easy and fun, dinner at a seafood place on the Strip, back to the house by midnight, exactly the low-key start I'd planned for. Second day was the beach and a long walk and sunburn and all of it. Second night was more of the same. Third morning is when things started to shift. I woke up before the others, which is my habit, and went to the kitchen to make coffee. The kitchen had a window over the sink that faced the small side yard between our house and the house next door, which appeared to be vacant, no cars in the drive, no lights in the windows, no signs of occupation. I was standing at the sink waiting for the coffee maker when I noticed something in the side yard. There was a chair there, a single folding lawn chair, the cheap aluminum kind, positioned in the side yard facing our kitchen window. It had not been there the night before. I was certain of that because I'd looked out that window when I washed up after dinner and the side yard had been empty. Sometime between midnight and 7 in the morning, someone had placed a chair in the side yard facing our kitchen window. I stood there and looked at it, and I did the thing I always do, which is try to find the reasonable explanation first. Maybe it had blown over from somewhere and landed that way. Maybe it was there before and I hadn't noticed. Maybe it belonged to the vacant house next door and someone had set it out. None of those explanations were fully convincing, but I held on to the most plausible one, which was that I hadn't noticed it the night before, and I went about making coffee. I mentioned it casually to Tess when she came down. She looked out the window and frowned and said it was weird but didn't make anything of it. Danny and Priya didn't comment. We went to the beach. I thought about the chair on and off during the day, but I had my color-coded certainty to fall back on, and I fell back on it. That night, around 11, I went upstairs to get something from the bedroom I was sharing with Tess. The bedroom had a window on the side of the house, same side as the kitchen window below it. I did not turn on the bedroom light because I didn't want to wake Tess, who was already in bed, and I was navigating by the ambient light from the hallway. I found what I needed, and I was turning to leave when I looked at the window. There was a figure in the side yard, standing beside the chair but not sitting in it, standing and looking up at the window. I want to be precise about what I saw and what I could not see. The side yard had no direct lighting, and the nearest street light was on the far side of the house. The figure was a shape, human in outline, standing still and oriented toward my window. I could not see a face. I could see that it was a person and that the person was looking up. Looking at the window I was standing at. I stepped back from the window into the shadow of the room, and I stood there for a moment with my heart going very fast and very loud. Then I went back to the window and looked. The yard was empty. The chair was still there. The figure was not. I turned on the light and woke Tess. She was not happy, but she was awake. I told her what I'd seen. She went to the window and looked and saw the empty yard and the chair and said I'd probably seen a shadow. I said shadows don't stand in yards and look at windows, and she said shadows do weird things at night. We went back and forth on it, and I went to bed unconvinced and lay there for a long time. The next morning, I called the rental management company. I told them about the chair and what I'd seen the night before. The woman I spoke with was professional and pleasant and told me they'd have someone check the property. I asked her about the house next door, whether it was managed by the same company, whether anyone should be there. She said she'd look into it and call me back. She called me back 2 hours later. She said the house next door was not on their management roster, that it was a private property, and that she'd been unable to reach the owner. She said if I felt unsafe, I should call the local police non-emergency line, which I did immediately after hanging up. A patrol officer came out that afternoon. He checked the side yard, the exterior of the adjacent house, and the surrounding area. He found the chair, which I showed him, and he agreed it was positioned oddly. He knocked on the door of the adjacent house and got no answer. He checked the windows and said the house appeared empty. He told us to lock up carefully and call if we saw anything further. That night, the 4 of us stayed in together. We locked every door and window, closed every blind, kept every light on. Around 1 in the morning, all 4 of us awake and watching something on the TV too loudly, we heard footsteps on the back deck. Slow, deliberate footsteps, walking the length of the back deck, stopping at the back door, a pause that lasted about 10 seconds, and then walking back. Priya called 911. I am not going to pretend I did the brave thing because I did not. All 4 of us were in the corner of the living room farthest from the back door when the police arrived about 6 minutes later. The officers went through the exterior of the property and found no one, but they found something on the back deck that one of the officers brought to my attention. The chair from the side yard had been moved to the back deck. It was now positioned directly in front of the back door, facing in. We checked out the next morning, a full day early. I called my mom from the car. We drove straight back to Columbus, and I did not stop being afraid of every rest stop and gas station we pulled into until we crossed the Ohio state line. The management company refunded our last night without argument, which told me something about how seriously they were taking it, or how many times something like this had happened at that property. I have one color-coded folder on my phone now that contains a specific checklist I built after that trip. It has line items that were never on any list I made before. Things like checking whether adjacent properties appear occupied, photographing the exterior of the rental on arrival so you have a baseline, confirming that all window locks actually engage. It's a different kind of planning now, the kind that comes from knowing what you didn't know to look for. That chair is still on my mind, not just that it moved, that someone moved it to face the door while we were all inside. Like they were getting ready. Like they were planning to be there for a while. Story 2. I want to be upfront about something. I'm 26 years old and I grew up in a suburb of Nashville, and I have never thought of myself as someone who attracts trouble. I go to work, I hang out with my friends, I watch too much college football. I am in every way a boring and unremarkable person, and I mean that as a point of pride. Nothing interesting happens to boring people. That was always my understanding. Spring break of my junior year dismantled that understanding in about 4 hours on a Wednesday night in a vacation town in the Florida Panhandle. There were 3 of us. Me, my best friend since 7th grade Colton, and our friend Wesley, who we'd known since freshman year of college. 3 guys, 1 rented SUV, a 3-night stay at a condo in a small beach town between Pensacola and Panama City that I'll call what the locals call it, which is just the Panhandle, because most of the towns down there blur together along the Emerald Coast Highway. The condo was on the 3rd floor of a low-rise building 2 blocks from the beach, 2 bedrooms, a balcony facing the parking lot, which was less glamorous than we'd hoped, but fine. First 2 days were exactly what spring break is supposed to be. Beach, food, the kind of mild sunburn that feels earned. We didn't know anyone in town, which was fine. We're comfortable with that. We had each other and our own entertainment and no particular agenda. Wednesday was our last full day. We'd been at the beach most of the afternoon and came back to the condo around 6 to clean up before dinner. The three of us went out to a restaurant on the main strip at around 8, nothing fancy, the kind of place with paper on the tables and buckets of Pilandite shrimp. We were there for about 2 hours. Nothing happened at dinner. This is important because I want you to understand that we had not done anything, spoken to anyone, or drawn any attention of any kind before Wednesday night. We got back to the condo building at around 10 and took the elevator to the 3rd floor. The building had exterior corridor access, meaning the hallway was open air on one side, looking down at the parking lot, with unit doors on the other side. Standard Florida Beach condo construction. We were walking down the corridor to our unit, the three of us, Colton in front with the key card, when I noticed a man at the far end of the corridor. He was leaning against the railing at the end of the corridor, facing our direction, arms on the railing behind him, looking at us. He was maybe 40, heavyset, wearing a dark t-shirt. He wasn't doing anything except standing there and looking at us as we walked down the corridor toward our unit, which happened to be near the end of the corridor where he was standing. Colton said hey as we passed, because that's what Colton does, and the man didn't respond. He just watched us go to our unit door, and he was still standing at the railing when Colton got the door open, and we went inside. We talked about him for about 30 seconds. Weird guy, standing in the corridor, maybe a guest in one of the other units who'd come out for air. We moved on. We watched television, talked about the drive home the next day, went to our respective rooms around midnight. I don't know what time it was exactly when I woke up. My phone was across the room, and I didn't get up to check it. What woke me was a sound from the balcony. Our unit had a balcony off the living room and a sliding glass door that we had locked before bed. The sound was subtle, the specific sound of someone testing a sliding door in its track. The small resistance rattle of a locked door being tried. I lay in bed and listened. The sound came again, the door being tried, and then a pause, and then again. I got up and went to the bedroom door and opened it quietly and looked into the living room. The sliding glass door was closed and locked, the curtain partially drawn, and through the gap in the curtain I could see the balcony. There was a figure on the balcony. On our 3rd floor balcony. He was trying the door handle. Slowly and quietly, the same careful testing motion I'd heard from bed, checking whether the lock would give. He was wearing a dark t-shirt. I went to Wesley's room, and I woke him, and I put my hand over his mouth before he could make a sound, and I told him in a whisper what was happening and pointed to the living room. Then I went and woke Colton the same way. The three of us stood in the living room in the dark, and I called 911 with the volume all the way down, and the phone pressed to my ear, and relayed what was happening in a voice so low the dispatcher had to ask me to repeat myself twice. She stayed on the line. She told me officers were on the way and to stay away from the door. The figure on the balcony tried the door 2 more times that I counted, each attempt slightly more prolonged than the last, like he was increasing pressure methodically, and then he stopped. I watched through the gap in the curtain. He was standing still on the balcony now, not trying the door, just standing there. And then he looked directly at the gap in the curtain where I was standing. I stepped back. I don't know if he could see me in the dark interior of the room or if he was just looking at the door. But he looked at exactly the spot I was standing, and he held it, and I held my breath, and neither of us moved for what the dispatcher later told me was about 90 seconds based on the call log. Then I heard the police cruiser pull into the parking lot below, and the figure moved. He went to the balcony railing, the same railing he'd apparently come up, and he went over it and down in a way that suggested he knew exactly how he'd gotten up. By the time the officers came to our unit door, he was gone from the balcony. They searched the property and the surrounding area. They found him in the parking lot of a restaurant 2 buildings down, walking casually in the direction of the main road. He was detained. I was asked to come down and look at him from a distance, which I did, and I confirmed it was the same man from the corridor. He was not a guest in our building. He had no connection to anyone in the building that the officers could establish. What he did have which the officers told us about in the straightforward way that Florida law enforcement communicates these things, was a prior arrest in the same county for breaking and entering a vacation rental. He had done this before. The same method, the same type of building, the same exterior corridor access that made the balconies reachable from the parking structure railing if you knew how to use it. He had looked at us in the corridor when we came back from dinner. He had looked at 3 young guys with a key card going to their unit, and he had decided that our unit was the one he was going to try. That was the decision he made in the 30 seconds it took us to walk to our door. A full plan, a full method, a target selected based on a 30-second observation. I drove home the next morning at 5 in the morning instead of noon. I didn't sleep the rest of that night, and I didn't care. I just wanted to be in a car moving north. I've been to the Panhandle twice since then. Both times I've stayed in hotels with interior corridors, above the 4th floor, in rooms I specifically request to be away from stairwells. And I never look away from the corridor when I'm walking to my room. Not until the door is closed and locked behind me. Not even for a second. Story 3. This is the story I have told in fragments to different people over the past 3 years, and never in full to anyone, because the full version requires me to admit something at the end that I have not been entirely ready to admit until now. I'm going to tell the full version today because I think the part I've been leaving out is the most important part. It's the part that changed the way I move through the world, and I think it needs to be said. I'm 25. I'm from Baton Rouge originally, and I was going to school in Baton Rouge at the time, LSU, junior year. Spring break of that year, a group of 6 of us drove down to South Padre Island in Texas, which is about an 8-hour drive, and a destination that is exactly what you think it is, a long, narrow barrier island off the southern Texas coast, where roughly the entire college student population of the American Southwest seems to converge every March. We'd planned it since November. 3 girls, 3 guys, 2 separate hotel rooms in the same hotel, 1 vehicle that we crammed ourselves and our bags into and pointed southwest on a Thursday morning. The hotel was mid-range, nothing fancy, right on the seawall. Our room was on the 5th floor, myself and my 2 friends Becca and Lorraine, with a view of the Gulf and a balcony we used constantly. The guys were 2 floors down. The first 2 days were unremarkable in the best way, beach and food, and the specific chaos of South Padre in spring break season, which is a lot of noise and color and people and a general sense that the normal rules of daily life are suspended. On the 3rd day, Saturday, something happened that seemed minor and turned out not to be. We were at the beach in the afternoon, the 6 of us, when a man sat down in the sand near us. Not in our group, not introduced to us, just a man who sat down about 15 feet away with a beer and a posture that suggested he was settling in. He was older than the typical spring break crowd, mid-30s maybe, alone, and within a few minutes he started talking to us in the easy, open way that strangers on spring break beaches sometimes do. He asked where we were from. We said Baton Rouge. He said he was from Houston. He'd been coming to South Padre for years. He knew all the best spots. Nothing about this was alarming. People talk to strangers on spring break beaches. That is part of what spring break beaches are. He was pleasant and unremarkable, and after maybe 10 minutes the conversation drifted and he went back to his beer and we went back to ours, and eventually we left the beach. I did not think about him again until later that night. We had gone out, the 6 of us, to a beachfront bar that was loud and packed, and exactly the kind of place that South Padre is full of during spring break. We were there for about 2 hours, dancing and talking and doing what 21-year-olds at a beach bar do. At some point, I looked across the bar and saw the man from the beach. Same man, same face, standing at the far end of the bar with a drink, looking in our direction. I pointed him out to Becca. She looked and said maybe he just liked the same bar. Lorraine said same, that it wasn't unusual to run into someone twice in a resort town. I accepted both of those explanations because they were reasonable. We stayed for another hour, and when I looked again, he was gone. We got back to the hotel around midnight. The guys went to their room and we went to ours. We were on the 5th floor and we took the elevator, and I remember standing in that elevator, feeling the specific pleasant tiredness of a good night and a warm place, and thinking I was going to sleep well. We were in the room for maybe 20 minutes, Lorraine already in bed, Becca in the bathroom, me sitting on the balcony looking at the Gulf, when my phone buzzed with a text from one of the guys in our group, Marcus. It said, "Hey, is there a reason a guy has been standing outside the hotel looking up at your floor for the last 10 minutes? He was outside when we came back and he's still there. Older guy, just looking up." I stood up from the balcony chair and looked down over the railing. There was a man on the sidewalk below, looking up. I could not see his face from that angle in the dark. I stepped back from the railing immediately. I called Marcus. He said the man was still there, that he'd watched him from the window of their room on the 3rd floor, that the man was looking specifically at the 5th floor and had not moved in 10 minutes since Marcus first noticed him. I asked Marcus if he could see his face. Marcus said not well. I described the man from the beach. Marcus said possibly, he couldn't be sure. We called the front desk. We explained what was happening. The front desk attendant said they'd have security check the exterior. Within about 5 minutes, Marcus texted that the man had walked away before security got outside, that he'd moved off down the seawall in the direction of the beach when the hotel's front doors opened. Security confirmed no one was in the area. The front desk took our room number and said they'd note it and increase exterior checks overnight. I want to tell you that was the end of it, and in a practical sense it was. Nothing else happened that night. Nobody came to our door. Nobody was on our balcony. We were fine. But here is the part I have always left out when I tell this story. The part I said at the beginning I was going to include this time. About 2 weeks after we got back from South Padre, I was going through the photos on my phone from the trip. I had a lot, the way you do after a beach week. Hundreds of casual shots of the beach and the bar and the hotel room and the view from the balcony. I was scrolling through them and I stopped on one. It was a photo I had taken on the beach that first afternoon, before anything had happened, before the man had sat down near us. A wide shot of the beach, blue water, crowded sand, all of us in the frame. I'd taken it as a group shot, pointing the camera back toward our setup. In the background of the shot, at the far edge of the frame, there was a man standing on the beach looking in the direction of our group. I zoomed in. The resolution wasn't great at that zoom level, but it was clear enough. It was the same man. He had been there before he sat down near us. He had been standing in the background watching our group before he made the approach. Before the conversation, before the friendly questions about where we were from, before any of it that I could have identified as a reason to be cautious. He had been watching first, and I had taken a photograph of it without knowing. I went through every photo from the trip after that. I found him in the background of 2 more. One from later that same afternoon, further up the beach, still in the background of a shot I'd taken of Becca and Lorraine. And one from the bar that night, in the background of a video clip I'd taken of the group at a table, standing near the wall at the edge of the frame watching us before I'd spotted him at the bar. I counted the hours. He had been watching our group for at least 6 hours across that Saturday before I noticed him the second time and thought anything of it. 6 hours of observation, a deliberate approach and conversation to establish which hotel we were from, and then standing outside that hotel at midnight looking up at our floor. I have asked myself many times what I should have done differently and where. The answer I keep arriving at is nowhere obvious. The beach conversation was unremarkable. Seeing him at the bar could have been coincidence, and I treated it as such. Nothing I did was wrong. What I know now that I didn't know then is to look at the background. Not just the person who approaches you, not just the face in the crowd that you can identify. The background, the edge of the frame, the figure standing further back who hasn't introduced themselves yet. Because the introduction is not the beginning. The introduction is step 3 or step 4 of something that started while you were looking somewhere else. I go through my photos differently now. I look at the edges first. And sometimes, I find things I wish I hadn't. 3 spring breaks. 3 trips that started with color-coded plans and packed bags and the specific freedom of a week without obligations, and ended somewhere none of them planned to go. Jade builds different checklists now. Reed picks his hotels by floor and corridor type and never lingers in a hallway. And Camille looks at the background of every photograph she takes, and sometimes she finds things in them, and when she does, she deals with what she finds. Here is what I keep coming back to with spring break stories specifically. You go somewhere to let your guard down. That is the whole point. You leave behind the routine and the structure and the vigilance that daily life requires, and you let yourself be somewhere that feels like freedom. And that feeling is real and it is good and you should have it. But freedom has edges, and the people who pay attention to those edges are not always people who want to protect them. Sometimes they're people who have been waiting for exactly that moment. The moment your guard drops. The moment you're far enough from home that nobody knows your name. The moment the trip is good enough that your eyes are looking at what's in front of you instead of what's behind you. That chair in the side yard. That man on the balcony railing. That figure in the background of a photograph, already watching, already planning, already 3 steps ahead of the moment you thought everything started. They were there before you noticed them. They are always there before you notice them. So go on your trip. Have the week you planned. Enjoy every moment of it because those moments are worth having. Just check the background sometimes. Just look at the edges. Just make sure that what's supposed to be in the frame is all that's there. Stay safe, stay aware, and have a good spring break.